Shantavius, there was a girl playing an accordion or flute when we were here in 2019. You know what I'm talking about?
Here we are already.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Centrum Foundation's Blues Talks. I'm your host, Mark Puryear, and today we're going to be talking about the advent of the electric guitar into really being incorporated into music. We have a great panel, and I'll start by introducing the first person to my right. That is Andrew Ali. Andrew, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm from Richmond, Virginia. I play harmonica. Blues harmonica is my love. And I'm here teaching a couple classes about harmonica and also performing.
Thank you, Andrew. And next to Andrew is Big John Atkinson. And John has been here doing some recording, working with the really older technology of recording. So please, John, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I grew up in the panhandle of Florida and grew up going to New Orleans. My dad was real into music, jazz and blues, so I got really into like the 30s era, blues, bluebird era as a young age, and also the post-war era. So not only do I play guitar and bass and harmonica, drums, and those styles, I also, over the years, got really into recording. Just from my love of the old records and how good they made me feel when I listened to them. So I wanted to know how to make those sounds, and just put my whole life into it. So here I am.
All right, great. Thank you for doing that, because so much of the technology gets, ends up in the trash heap and nobody knows how to use it, or...
And it's fun to use, so
Yeah.
we all get to enjoy it.
And next to John is Todd, tell me your last name.
Cambio.
I'm drawing a blank, excuse me, folks. Todd Cambio, we've sat and talked for about 2 hours today, so.
Means change in Italian and Spanish.
Okay, Cambio, yeah. Thank you. And Todd, tell us about yourself.
So I grew up outside of Chicago. I was born in Chicago and grew up playing blues with old timers in Chicago in the 1980s, and played throughout my youth into my 30s, and then eventually started repairing old guitars and then building guitars. And I build guitars in an old style. I still play a little bit, perform. I don't perform very much, but make guitars and mandolins for people that play traditional music.
And I must add, very nice instruments.
Yes.
Yes. Fraulini is the name of your company, Fraulini Guitars.
Guitar.
And next to Todd is Rodrigo Montavani, and Rodrigo is a bass player, upright bass player. So Rodrigo, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I play upright bass, I play electric bass, I play sousaphone, I play washtub, I play electric bass. So everything related with the low frequency, I try to learn a little bit. I'm born and raised in Brazil. I've been in Chicago almost 5 years now. I'm part of a band in there, but I also play with different artists in there. And I've been on this field like blues, country blues, Americana, really, like nearly 20 years by now. I started playing with the guys in Brazil and also bringing the guys from here to Brazil and touring with them over there. Also, I was coming here kind of often during this, 20 years that I've been playing. So I always got in contact with the guys from here and tried to absorb as much as I could about the tradition, about names, about anything that, is not too easy to find in Brazil or any country outside the United States, really. So I feel very lucky and proud and honored to be living here and get in contact more closely with like the elders, with people like, John, like you said. We always try to get together and do some recordings. And the beauty about this thing, to be close to these people, every time that we are together, besides the music that we make, we talk a lot about like influence, about names, about albums, and that like in a natural way, helps to develop the knowledge and to keep going and try to pass along all the information that we receive. So that's why it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you.
Glad to have
Thank you.
you.
Rodrigo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
glad
love
to have
you.
you. I guess first question I'd like to pose to our panel is, why electrify the instrument? Or what was the impulse to putting a pickup or figuring out how to electrify the instruments in the 30s? And anyone can answer or just throwing that to the panel. So.
Yeah, I think as the guitar got popular in the 30s, the guitar was actually I'd say as ensembles and bands became more popular in the 30s and late 20s, the need to hear the guitar expressing itself in a large group became a real necessity. And prior to the 20s and the teens, the most showcase the guitar was more in country blues or more in old time music or folk music or so as the ensembles became bigger records, people were really wanting to hear like jazz and ensemble blues from Chicago, New York, New Orleans. The guitar players started growing as well. They started picking up horn lines and picking up melody. Instead of becoming mainly a rhythm instrument in the rhythm section, the guitar players really blossomed and started reaching, and you had guys like Lonnie Johnson and Eddie Lang and George Barnes and so many people, Tampa Red, Big Bill Brunzi,
Charlie Christian, I guess.
yeah, Charlie Christian, and they started having a new voice. They could play the guitar like they sang or like they heard a horn player.
Yep.
And once that became popular, everybody wanted to hear that guitar. So then you got to have some kind of amplification because no guitar, no matter how big you make it, is gonna be heard over a giant band.
Right.
And I think that's what's great about the early electric guitar was that it still is a rhythm instrument. It's still meant to switch back and forth between a soloist and a rhythm instrument. So the pickup is a great invention for the instrument, but it definitely should not take away from the fact that the guitar is still a rhythm instrument. So you still have to be conscious of that, in my opinion.
Same with harmonica, sort of mimicking those horn lines. You started to hear, harmonica players play what you'd hear a traditional, big band horn section play. And, whenever, there's a debate on who played the first amplified harmonica, but, whoever found that sound, they realized they were getting something that sounded more like a horn, maybe,
Or three horns.
Exactly.
On one.
Exactly. And then once that was discovered, I'm sure everyone started sort of running with it because it started to add a whole new dynamic to the sound, to the harmonica.
Yeah.
And that kept up with the guitar.
Yeah, and bass too.
And bass.
Like
yep.
DeArmond, who made a lot of the guitar pickups. They made the bass and the fiddle electric pickup, in the 40s. So, although the steel guitar came first and then the electric guitar, it really was immediately after that at the same time that, the bass player, was like, hey, I might need a little extra volume on certain things. So, like you're saying, it really changed everything at that point.
What you're saying there, John, reminds me of what's said a lot of times with electric bands. It's like one person turns, it's a creep.
Yeah.
And everybody creeps up, and then it's like, it's so loud.
That's where the discipline has to step in.
Shouldn't have given us the knob.
Yeah.
Right. But,
You throw a drummer into the mix.
right. But, not just volume, though. It's just like new tones,
Yes.
were developed.
New ways to express.
New ways to
sustain.
Exactly.
Like guitar has no sustain.
Right.
So to be able to make a guitar sound like a voice and hold a note and add vibrato and have it hold for at least an extra few seconds. I think that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, I think that there's this confluence that happens with the technology of the pickup, and amplification, and also folks, the Great Migration, folks moving up from the South, cities like Chicago, Detroit, the setting of the music comes different from like a Saturday night dance, fish fry or something, to a bar, tavern in the city, maybe more than just Saturday night because people are working
The factory
the
job.
factory
Yeah.
jobs, making better money in 8-hour days. And so smaller place, you need the amplification, and then the music starts to fundamentally change. Where like the country blues, the guitar player might be playing solo, playing the bass with their thumb, and finger picking a melody. That kind of becomes unnecessary as you have an ensemble. And it becomes like, if you do that in an ensemble, it's just like too much.
Yeah, well, space became a thing.
Yeah, space becomes a thing. That's right.
Yeah.
But I think also it's very necessary. Like I live in New Orleans and we play. The scene there is great. You can all the bands, jazz bands, early blues bands. They mostly play with no amplification at all. The basses are totally acoustic. Even if there's a drummer, there's no bass amp.
Yeah.
But one thing you learn very quick as a guitar player is even if you're, say, playing banjo or guitar in the New Orleans style, if you're playing in a horn band and you're playing in these tiny clubs, everybody's dancing, everybody's partying. You cannot hear that guitar at all. It's absolutely, once people start dancing and you're playing with horns, it's lost.
Yeah.
You're really only there for the band to hear you.
To keep time.
So having that extra little amplification, if you can discipline yourself correctly and not let it step you and everybody else up in the game, if you can learn that discipline, then you really have a very versatile instrument. Because same with harmonica.
Yep.
I mean, imagine Sonny Boy back in the day. He might want to play one song on the amp, and the next song get low and down and play quiet. And it really, if you use it correctly, it can really be a magical and not an obnoxious thing.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. That's
More
true.
dynamics, more options.
Yeah, totally.
And Rodrigo, if you could share a little bit about what you think, or your experience moving from the acoustic to the electric.
Sure. Yeah, I think specifically on bass is a different case than the guitar or harmonic or violin or dandolin, because it took a minute until we started using electrification on upright bass, even though they started putting pickups on guitar and recording with the electric guitar. We still had the upright bass on the recordings. They started recording the harp with amplifiers, electric harp. Still have upright bass on the recording. So it took a minute until we buy the idea that we need more volume. But also, I think the invention of the electric bass wasn't only because of the volume, but was also because of the transportation. So the old timers used to call the electric bass the portable bass.
Yeah.
So it helps, to get easier in the places. So, and with that, we not only change the technique and the sound, we change the instrument really.
Yes.
So that's a big change, in our instrument, the electrification of all those other instruments. It changed our instrument.
Yeah.
So and with that, we lost some techniques that's kind of impossible to do, just like the slap. We have the slap on electric bass, but that even though that's the same name, the same technique,
It's different sound.
the different sound and brings to another different world. So a guy who slaps on an electric bass not necessarily knows how to slap on an upright bass, and vice versa. So that was a big change for us. All this electrification on harp, on guitar, and the bands getting louder. It changed our life.
And didn't Little Walter was known to say that he preferred electric bass later on because, when he had the Myers brothers backing him, because he could hear the note way better. Whereas on the upright in a club on a bandstand, it was harder to hear. Where he was said in an interview that he actually preferred the electric bass for that reason, that you could actually feel the notes and. So it's just a different.
Yeah, and also there's some footage nowadays that we can watch on YouTube or something. There's a tour, a memorable tour, that some guys went to Europe and start to recording, and play some live shows in there. So one of the shows, there's a lot of people in a big theater, and Ray Solon is playing bass, and Otis Spann on piano, Willie B. Guy Smith on drums. and you can see there's a noisy crowd, and Rain So Lonely is playing acoustic, and something must happen before because the bass is completely out of tune. But he kept playing, and I'm pretty sure that he's not able to listen exactly what he's playing
Yeah.
while he's playing because of all the noise.
Yeah.
So you can see that the problem to listen yourself once you're playing bigger shows with a noisy crowd and a noise instruments around.
Yeah.
It's like the first monitors, like
Yeah.
within the
Yeah,
band,
you
it's
got
like,
your own monitor.
You got your own monitor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the technology is really transformed a lot. Also, the audience experience. I mean, if you think about, how if it wasn't a big band, a small ensemble, generally you would have been a smaller venue and a smaller audience to have that effect because you couldn't hit, the back of a big hall with a small acoustic ensemble. Something that just ran through my mind that I was thinking about is really the change that happened, but also how it affected the players and their ability, their playing. And I think,
Yeah.
a well-made acoustic guitar is a well-made instrument. The electrification happened mostly on F-holes, if I'm right. Is that right? The early
on, oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was like they were using the big jazz box
Totally.
F-holes to amplify. So those instruments were, and their idea was sort of copying the violin a little bit. They're trying to, and also
Sure.
get this volume. So the bodies were getting bigger, as you
Yeah.
said. And there's 17-inch big jazz box with F-holes. And, I guess what I'm trying to say is when it actually went to the solid instruments, which the bass went right to a plank, and put those pickups on that, what was it, the early precision.
Yeah.
But it took a while for the guitar to move to that solid
Totally.
body. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you could talk a little bit about that, it's.
Yeah, it's actually funny because one of the first electric guitars ever was actually a solid body. But when Rickenbacker made it as an experiment, basically it was laughed away. So they tucked it away and never touched it again until the early 50s.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think it was just too drastic of a change
Right.
to have somebody going from an instrument that could be a rhythm instrument and a lead instrument to all of a sudden here's this instrument that does this one thing, it's like play lead guitar or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think it took a long time because I think there was just a lot of resistance to the electric guitar at first. Just like you're saying, I'm sure the amplification of the guitar in the wrong hands probably, upset more people than it. In fact, there's actually a thing that when Django Reinhardt came to America, and it was in 43 or 45-ish, Gibson loaned him or gave him an ES 300, which he's pictured with in many photos.
Yeah.
But people that went to his concerts, where it was like the first time he ever played electric guitar, they said it was just the most obnoxious thing, that he played so loud that you couldn't hear anybody else in the band.
Yeah.
And obviously he's probably just having some fun, but I feel like the electric guitar took time to be accepted. If you were Charlie Christian and you immediately figured out how to use it,
Yeah.
then you were accepted. But I think most people that grabbed the electric guitar in the late 30s and 40s, probably took them a little time. So I feel like that's why they didn't jump over to solid bodies so fast, is because it was such a drastic change and it really needed time. Also, during the war, they stopped allowing, people using metal on guitars.
That's right.
Yeah.
So if you look at Gibson guitars, for instance, the last electric guitar was made in 42. So they basically made electrics from 37 to 42, and then they cold stopped from 42 to 46. Gibson made 0 electric guitars. It's because of the war. So
Yeah.
they weren't making metal tailpieces anymore.
Right.
They weren't making metal bridges. It went all back to acoustic. So that's why you really only see wartime, like flat tops and some arch tops.
That's right, because even wire armature was.
They wouldn't even allow you to use it, you know.
Yeah,
So I-
shellac was good.
Yeah.
Record labels went
So
on.
maybe that had a reason to why you don't really see more electrics until the early 50s, because they probably weren't even really allowed to make them in some way.
That's
So,
true. I didn't think of that part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, because even some archtop guitars that I've had from the mid 40s, they even would have a wooden tailpiece because, you know, I mean, whatever the government was only allowing certain people to use certain amounts of metal, or
Yeah.
so I feel like that probably really hindered the manufacturing of electrics.
Okay, that's true. I think it did, because I had looked at record, you know, through some research I did, I looked at the record industry from a different aspect. I was really just looking at business models of the record industry and its relationship to our constructs of race and how the record industry dealt with people of different ethnicities in
Sure.
America. And
Absolutely.
I don't want to take a sidetrack, but they woke up at some point. Of course, everybody knows Mamie Smith's, you know, Crazy Blues was the wake up to, oh, there's a market in the African American community.
Totally.
Similarly, when they have heard those old Victrolas, some of the more inventive or I would say entrepreneurial spirits in the record industry went around the world recording. There's actually a recording from Kumasi, Ghana, from like the 1920s. And it was essentially a test recording to try to sell the technology and everything in Ghana. So
For a
they were
new
there-
electric
yeah,
recording.
and trying to sell the Victrolas. It was like,
Yeah.
let's get a Victrola in every house.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
no different than today with your, you know, this technology we have now. Where
Your
every-
phone.
Yeah, every kid should have a phone.
Yeah.
Give them out, give them out.
Right.
Yeah. They tried back then. It didn't work as well, but I know Library of Congress, you know, they have all the records, and there are records of people recording all different ethnic groups all around the world and trying to, again, here's a record. Here's
Yeah.
what you play it on. Let's, you know, get this product in the.
It seemed they were trying to do anything to not only record and promote it. You know. We were talking about this the other day about how in the 20s and 30s, labels like RCA and Columbia were setting up recording sessions in random towns, Atlanta,
Yes.
Mississippi,
Yeah.
Bristol, Tennessee, and they were putting ads out in the paper trying to bring people, new artists in to record.
Yeah.
They were trying to get new sounds just to try to catch any new sound they could get and try to make, you know, money off of it, obviously.
Yeah. And Todd, you mentioned San Antonio, which was
Yeah.
a big center for recording.
Yeah.
Did you talk a little bit about that? I mean, I know you've mentioned,
Well, yeah, Lonnie Johnson was one of the people that traveled with the OK remote recording team because, like, it was easier for, you know, if they came to a town like Memphis, it was easier for Lonnie Johnson as an African American to go to the black community and say, hey, who can play, than it was for some, like, white dude that worked for OK Records to come
Yeah.
to the African American community and say, hey, who can play? They're going to
Yeah.
get two different answers.
yeah.
Yeah, so he would travel with that remote unit to find African American talent in different cities.
Yeah. Was the 12 string an attempt to get more volume, do you think? Given that-
Well, the 12 string actually, you know, the first guitars were 12 string. You know, the 6 string was that was where it changed. But the instruments that the 6 string guitar came from, the oud, the Baroque
right.
guitar,
Yeah.
those were all like 12 string varieties.
Yeah.
So the 12 string existed in different cultures. But
Didn't Lonnie get his from South
Lonnie-
America
he
too?
got it in San Antonio when he was with the
Okay,
OK.
'cause there was a builder
recording
there
team.
that made the
Yep.
work for him.
Yeah, Guadalupe Costa, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Lonnie like came to San Antonio, and all these Mexican dudes were playing 12 string, and he was like, "That's it." And
Yeah.
he got it down in San Antonio, had it made for him, and then took it back to New York and recorded it.
Him and Eddie even
recorded with-
switched. They would switch guitars.
Yeah, with Eddie Lang, Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
made some really, and Texas Alexander,
Yeah.
Victoria Spivey.
Yeah. That's neat. I mean, because a lot of times, as I was talking to Todd earlier, and I had a little bit of that history twisted. He's like, "Well, he's straighten you out on this." We were talking about Leadbelly and his Stella, and you know, just all that background. So I think we have about 5 minutes left, and maybe we could share just and be totally candid. You give me your opinions, but as blues, the Chicago blues, you know, everything got electrified, and you know, I guess you know. You know, when Muddy Waters was playing his Telecasters, and you know, there were all the other guys playing electric guitars. The sound definitely changed, as you mentioned, John. There was sustain, but you know, things like slide technique. They were still using technique that they pulled off of the acoustic instruments, and just I think similarly, Andrew, the harmonica players, you know, up to Little Walter, and then. God, my brain is fried.
Big Walter.
Big
Walter, I'm
Sonny
sleepy.
Boy,
Yeah,
all those
Fryer.
a little
Snooki.
tired. But some people really got into that harp, and
Right.
like Little Walter's considered the one, but that most people heard.
Yeah, I think it's interesting this hearing, you know, how, you know, guitars started being sort of purpose built, you know, for amplification. I mean, even to this day, there are very few companies that are making mics specific to harmonica. So like
right.
still to this day, like astatic mics, Shure mics, those were all like radio mic, ham radio mics.
CB radio.
Cheap CB radio mics, they're still the go-to mics
Yeah.
for amplification. They just happen to be just the right size to where you can fit the harmonica over and cup
Yeah.
it right. It's just like kind of serendipitous. But even to this day, there's not too much purpose-built, you know, microphones. You know, we're still, you know, you find harp players still trying to find these older models, and I think that's interesting. It's just kind of like this. That's where the sound is, and it's
Yeah.
like we found the golden standard
If it
for
ain't
us.
broke, don't fix
And
it.
it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know, it's just interesting because that, you know, comparison to, you know,
Yeah,
guitar
yeah.
and bass is like
They
they
put
really
all the money
honed in
into
on
that.
that, but it's still kind of this lost sort of.
Well, I think like with electric harmonica, it was like it was the genres of music, whereas the guitar was, you know, after electric blues and gospel using electric guitar, the guitar just shot off in every genre direction. You know, rock and roll,
Yeah.
even Cuban bands had electric guitar. You know,
Right.
so whereas the harmonica was always had that hold on like that American blues sound. So.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you're saying, it kind of like harmonica just found its niche and
Yep.
it just sat
Found its
sat
pocket.
in that pocket.
Yep.
And the guitar is still kind of like, where does this go or where can this go? You know?
Yeah. You bring to mind Sister Rosetta Tharpe and her. I mean, being an innovator and playing religious
Yeah.
music, but also playing single
Yeah.
lines. And you know, now everybody's, oh, she was the inventor of rock and roll. I mean, that's the new
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
But I mean, she was playing spiritual music. you
Totally.
know, and-
She was playing electric very early
Oh,
on too.
yeah. And Todd, you may think of the American folk. What was it? The tours that went with Muddy Waters, and they went to England.
Yeah.
And there's some footage.
Rodrigo's.
Rodrigo, I'm sorry. Rodrigo mentioned that. There's footage, actually, there's CDs out of the American folk, I think in the 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My thought is, Willie Dixon continued to play that upright.
Yeah.
On Chuck Berry recordings, Willie's playing the upright,
Right.
and that is so much of what those great recordings are. Is Willie?
Oh,
Is
totally.
Willie?
Yeah.
Sure.
Lane-
Willie and Fred Billow in a lot of tracks, which are the rhythm section for a lot of blues albums, you know, and Chuck Berry was nothing but another blues guy
Yeah.
recording
Yeah.
in a little, you know, different style. And according to some information and books, you know, they were resistant to record him and let him like always in the end, you know,
Yep.
when they're done, they're gonna start working with Chuck Berry, some
Yeah.
new stuff, you know, like a experience. It wasn't something on purpose, like let's create rock and roll and play
Yeah.
differently. And they are playing just the same way
Yeah.
they are playing in the blues albums. Willie
Yeah.
Dixon,
Totally.
Fred Billow, you
Yeah.
know, all those guys.
I think Otis is even playing piano on some early,
Yeah.
Yeah.
very early Chuck Berry.
Yeah, Chuck Berry, there is a good example of that. and this is again a sort of a digression, but to me, he's iconic not just for the rock, but for his vision of where he wanted to take his music.
Sure.
And despite the racial restrictions of our country at the time, he wrote for young people of all backgrounds.
Totally.
And that was the thing that I always feel like, he got short shrift. Had he been not an African American, he would have been rolling.
Yeah.
And you look at Pat Boone, all
Well,
these
they did
people,
the same thing to Billie Holiday too.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
they,
all the people recording his songs. Some of his songs sound totally to my ear country.
yeah.
And he knew that. He was
Well, that's one thing about Chuck Berry. He was kind of like making fun of hillbillies, the way that hillbillies played music, and that was like part of his draw in St. Louis. And he says it in his autobiography.
Yeah.
Like, I was just like, my music was making fun of what the white hillbillies did. It was a swap, like it was a reverse minstrel show.
yeah, he was pretty sophisticated. A lot of people
So
don't
that's,
give him credit.
yeah, but like it's great that rock and roll is born from like black folks imitating white folks and white folks imitating black folks.
Yeah,
Well,
I
a
think-
lot of blues singers love country music. Like
That's true,
Lazy
yeah.
Lester.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're just obsessed with country
Yeah,
music.
and the effect that Jimmy Rogers had,
Yeah.
that like the
Exactly.
Tommy Johnson tune,
Yeah.
talking about the record companies really just like forcing, like it's not right for you have to perform within your boundaries.
Yeah, yeah.
There's this like test pressing where they're checking the levels of the mic, and Tommy Johnson is singing a Jimmy Rogers kind of yodel tune.
Yeah.
But that wasn't good for the record
yeah,
execs.
didn't fit their
Yeah.
fit their niche, and it's so true. I guess are we near the? How much time do we have? 0. Well, I want to thank our panel: Andrew Ali,
You.
Big John Atkinson, Todd Cambio. I'm sorry, I keep thinking of something else, and I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Rodrigo Montavani. And so thank you for joining us. Todd Cambio, I really appreciate your part. I have to say it. I appreciate your participation. And thanks all of you for watching. And from the Centrum Foundation, this is our last Blues Talk for this week of Blues Week. And thank you again.